The family dinner was my personal hell, held in the same mahogany-paneled room where my father once declared my English degree a waste of a good mind. My brother Mark, a surgeon with hands worth millions, smirked over his wine. "Still playing with your little stories, Leo?" My sister, Chloe, a high-powered attorney, chimed in with practiced pity. "It's a cute hobby. But at 44, isn't it time for a real job?" I just smiled, gripping my phone under the table. The screen glowed with an email I'd read a dozen times. The sender was a major Hollywood studio. The subject line, "Urgent, Ethereum Chronicles, 7-figure offer." They called me the lazy failure. Tonight, the failure was serving revenge. Mark, my older brother, tapped his fork against his plate, a gesture of impatience he'd perfected. He was Dr. Mark Vance, the man who stitched hearts back together but tore mine apart with every casual jab. He saw my life in Cleveland, running my tiny self-publishing company, Fabled Quill Press, as a pathetic joke. A story I told myself to avoid the real world. Chloe, the younger one, was worse. Her weapon was pity. Her face, a carefully constructed mask of concern, hid an attorney's precision for finding my weakest point. "Leo, we just worry," she'd say, the words dripping with condescension. They didn't worry. They relished my struggle. Their towering success required a foundation, and for 2 decades, I had been their rock bottom. They were the titans of the family, their achievements, the only currency that mattered. My father had set the exchange rate long ago, and my passion for storytelling had been declared worthless. This dinner was just another reminder of my bankruptcy in their eyes. Mark leaned forward again, his smile turning cruel. "So, how many copies of Ethereum Chronicles did Fabled Quill Press move this year? A dozen? 2? Come on, humor us." I let his question hang in the air, the silence stretching taut as a bowstring. How many copies? He had no idea what that question truly meant. He didn't see the 20 years of rejection letters from every publisher in New York, each one a paper cut to the soul. He didn't see the final soul-crushing meeting, where a junior editor told me fantasy was a quote 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 or a small quote. That was the day fabled quote 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 quote. Not in a boardroom but in my cramped Cleveland apartment, fueled by cheap coffee and pure unadulterated spite. It was my last stand. When I told my family, their reaction was exactly what I expected. Chloe had sent me a brochure for a local community college's accounting program. Mark had laughed, a short, barking sound. "Fabled Quill? Sounds about right. A fable, a myth, just like your career, Leo." They didn't see the years I poured into it. The second mortgage on my house. The nights I'd work a temp job packing boxes, just to pay the printing costs for a handful of copies. The crippling loneliness of believing in something no one else did. For them, my struggle was a comforting backdrop to their own soaring narratives. Dr. Vance saving lives. Attorney Vance winning impossible cases. And Leo Vance playing with his little stories in Ohio. The real breaking point had come 5 years ago, at a Christmas dinner just like this one. My father, his voice heavy with disappointment, had made his final offer. "Son, Mark has a position for you. Office manager at his clinic. It's stable. It's respectable. It's time to give up this fantasy." He didn't even look at me when he said it. He looked at Mark, as if seeking his approval. In that moment, I wasn't his son. I was a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tidied up by my successful children. I refused. The silence that followed was the coldest thing I've ever felt. That night, I went home and started writing Ethereum Chronicles. I poured every ounce of that rejection, every condescending glance, every whispered doubt into its pages. The book wasn't just a story. It was an argument. It was my rebuttal to a lifetime of being told I was less. My main character, a disgraced scholar cast out by a powerful council, wasn't just a character. He was me. So when Mark asked how many copies I'd sold, he wasn't just asking about a book. He was asking if my entire life had been a waste. He was twisting the knife my father had plunged into my heart 5 years ago. I looked at Mark, then at Chloe, her face a perfect porcelain mask of concern. How many copies? The question was a joke to them, but the answer was my entire world. And the real answer wasn't a number. It was a memory, seared into my brain like a brand. The memory of my last trip to New York, 7 years ago. My final meeting with a traditional publisher. I'd been so close, I could taste it. In a moment of weakness, I'd made the mistake of telling Chloe, my voice shaking with a desperate hope I hadn't felt in years. "I'll make some calls," she'd said, her tone dripping with the kind of magnanimous pity she reserved for lost causes. "My firm has connections everywhere. I'll put in a good word for you, Leo." I walked into that meeting feeling, for the first time, like a real author. I walked out a ghost. The junior editor, a kid barely out of college, hadn't even read past the first chapter. He'd leaned back in his chair, parroting lines that felt eerily familiar. "Fantasy is a dead-end genre," he'd said with a dismissive wave. "It's a niche audience. Frankly, we'd be doing you a disservice to encourage this." A disservice. It was a strange, clinical word. A lawyer's word. The pieces didn't click into place until 2 days later. I was at Chloe's apartment to pick up some old family photos. I heard her on the phone in the other room, her voice low and confidential. It was Mark. "Told my contact at the publisher to be blunt," she was saying, the words sharp and clear in the quiet apartment. "It's a mercy, really. He needed that dose of reality to finally give up this silly dream. It was for his own good. For his own good, the 3 most destructive words in the English language. It wasn't just that she hadn't helped. She had actively, precisely sabotaged me. She'd used her power not to lift me up, but to cut the last rung of the ladder from under my feet, all while calling it kindness. That wasn't pity. That was a kill shot, disguised as a hug. She hadn't just closed a door. She'd tried to wall me into the prison of her expectations. On the train back to Cleveland, the rejection letter felt weightless compared to the crushing mass of her betrayal. But the grief quickly burned away, leaving behind a rage that was clean, pure, and clarifying. They didn't just doubt me. They didn't just pity me. They needed me to fail. My failure was a structural support for their towering egos. Fine. If I was going to be their foundation, I would become the earthquake. That rage built fabled quill press brick by bitter brick. That rage wrote every single word of Asterix's Ethereum Chronicles. Every setback the hero faced was one of their condescending remarks. Every villain was a reflection of their smiling, pitying faces. So as I sat there, at that polished mahogany table, their expectant faces waiting for a number, a low, pathetic number they could sneer at, I finally had the answer they deserved. I met Chloe's gaze, letting my smile widen, feeling the power shift in the room for the first time in my life. I saw a flicker of confusion, then annoyance, in her eyes. The lazy failure wasn't supposed to smile like this. I let my smile linger, a quiet, deliberate thing that felt entirely alien in this room. "How many copies?" I repeated softly, savoring the question like a fine wine. I looked from Mark's smug face to Chloe's mask of practiced sympathy. "That's become a surprisingly complicated question, Mark," I said, my voice even. "Fabled Quill Press had a very good quarter. In fact, we just closed our single biggest sale." I took a slow sip of water. "For 1 unit." Mark barked out that short, ugly laugh. "1 unit? My God, Leo, you're a powerhouse. Who'd you sell it to? Mom finally buy one for her bookshelf?" "Don't be cruel, Mark," Chloe interjected, her voice a silken sheath for a steel blade. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with manufactured kindness. "That's wonderful, Leo. A sale is a sale. Every journey begins with a single step." Her condescension was so thick I could have bottled it. It was perfect. They were walking right into it. "You're right, Chloe. It's not about the quantity," I agreed, leaning forward slightly, claiming my space at the table. "It's about the quality of the buyer. This one was different." I pulled my phone from my pocket and placed it face down on the polished mahogany, right next to my father's empty place setting. The gesture was casual, but it drew their eyes like a magnet. "What do you mean, different?" Mark asked, his curiosity finally piqued, laced with annoyance that I wasn't playing my usual role of the kicked dog. "Well, it wasn't the sale of a physical book," I explained carefully. "It was the sale of the property itself, the intellectual property." I let the corporate jargon hang in the air, a language they both understood and respected. Chloe's brow furrowed, the mask of pity cracking to reveal the sharp attorney beneath. "What are you talking about, Leo? Who buys the intellectual property of a self-published book?" Quote, the moment had arrived, the fulcrum on which 2 decades of mockery would finally pivot. I looked directly at my sister, the saboteur, the architect of my lowest moment. "Actually, Chloe, I was hoping you could help me with that," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "The buyer's legal team sent over the final contract this afternoon. It's a bit more complex than my usual paperwork. Since you're the family expert on contracts, I thought you could give it a look. I wouldn't want to get taken advantage of." A predatory gleam entered Chloe's eyes. This was her arena. She could dissect a 100-page merger agreement before breakfast. A contract for her brother's 1-unit sale would be a trivial, amusing diversion. An opportunity to point out his amateur mistakes and reassert her dominance, all under the guise of helping. "All right, Leo," she sighed, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Let me see it. I can't have you signing away your life's work for a pittance." The word pittance dripped with a condescension so pure, it was almost beautiful. Mark snorted. "Life's work? Don't strain yourself, Chloe. It's probably a 2-page agreement to sell the book rights to some local community theater." I ignored him. My focus was entirely on my sister. I slid the phone across the polished table. It stopped just short of her wine glass. "It's already unlocked," I said quietly. She picked it up with the tips of her fingers, as if it were a curious, slightly dirty artifact. Her expression was one of theatrical patience, the kind a parent reserves for a child, showing them a drawing of a lopsided house. She tapped the screen, opening the email I'd left waiting. For a moment, she just stared. Nothing happened. Then, I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible muscle twitched high on her cheekbone. Her professional mask was flawless, but I knew her tells. I'd had a lifetime to study them. Her gaze, which had been scanning the screen with detached amusement, sharpened. It froze on the top of the page. "What is it?" Mark prompted, swirling his wine, bored with the game already. "Did they spell fabled wrong?" Chloe didn't answer. Her thumb moved, swiping down the screen with a sudden, jerky motion. Her breathing, which had been slow and steady, hitched. It was a tiny sound, almost lost in the quiet hum of the room, but to me, it was a thunderclap. Her knuckles, wrapped around the sleek phone, were white. She swiped again, faster this time, scrolling past clauses and subclactions, hunting for the number, for the part of any contract that truly matters. I saw the exact moment she found it. Her face, so carefully composed, seemed to lose its structure. The mask didn't just crack, it dissolved. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a waxy, pale sheen. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. It was as if the part of her brain that formulated condescending pity had short-circuited, encountering a voltage it was never designed to handle. "Chloe? Cat got your tongue?" Mark laughed, oblivious. He leaned over, trying to peer at the screen. My God, what could possibly be in there? Did they offer him a lifetime supply of ink cartridges? Chloe flinched, pulling the phone closer to her chest in a protective, almost fearful gesture. She looked up at me, and for the first time in 20 years, the pity was gone. The condescension was gone. In its place was something raw and ugly. Pure, unfiltered shock, rapidly curdling into disbelief. Her eyes, the eyes of a shark who has just realized it's trapped in a net, darted around the room as if searching for an escape. This is a joke, she whispered, the words thin and brittle. This is some kind of prank. Where did you get this template? It's not a template, Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I leaned back in my chair, lacing my fingers behind my head, a posture of relaxation I had never once dared to assume at this table. The power had shifted. It was a physical thing, a change in the room's atmospheric pressure. I looked past her, to my brother. Mark, she seems to be having a little trouble. Why don't I just tell you? Mark's smirk finally faltered. He looked from my relaxed posture to Chloe's stunned face, and the cogs of his brilliant surgeon's mind finally started turning. He was sensing the anomaly. The data wasn't matching the diagnosis. The buyer, I said, letting the words fall into the silence like stones into a deep well, is Apex Studios. Mark's face went blank. The name registered, but the context was impossible. It didn't compute. And the intellectual property they bought, I continued, my gaze locking back onto Chloe's, was the film and television rights for *Ethereum Chronicles. The offer, the one you're looking at right now, is for $1.5 million. Silence. A profound, absolute void where their mockery used to live. Mark's wine glass, halfway to his lips, stopped. He stared at me, his mouth agape. Chloe shook her head, a violent, negative motion. No, that's not possible. A self-published, no one. They don't. They do, I said, cutting her off. When they find a story they think can launch a multi-billion-dollar franchise. They called the world building unparalleled. They said the main character's struggle against a system designed to crush him was, quote, painfully authentic. I let that hang in the air for a beat. I wonder where I got the inspiration for that. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my voice dropping to a near whisper, for her and her alone. You know, I almost didn't write it. I almost gave up. After that last meeting in New York, the one where the editor told me it was a, quote, dead-end genre? The one you arranged? Chloe's face crumpled. The last vestiges of the high-powered attorney vanished, replaced by the face of someone who had just been caught, red-handed, in a crime she never thought would see the light of day. The sabotage, the mercy she had performed for my own good. I smiled, a real smile this time, wide and sharp. So, to answer your original question, Mark, I said, my voice rising to its normal volume again, pulling my stunned brother back into the execution. How many copies did Fabled Quill Press sell? 1. We sold 1 copy. To the president of production at Apex Studios. And it turns out, sometimes, 1 is all you need. Mark's hand trembled, sloshing crimson wine over the rim of his glass onto the pristine white tablecloth. The stain spread like a fresh wound. He didn't seem to notice. His surgeon's mind, trained to process complex data and act with precision, had simply stalled. The variables, Leo, failure, Cleveland, $1.5 million, Apex Studios, refused to form a coherent equation. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly ajar, the witty retort he was famous for dead on his lips. Chloe, however, was a different story. The shock had passed, and now a desperate, frantic energy was taking its place. She lowered the phone to the table as if it were radioactive. Leo, please, she stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. That conversation, you misunderstood. I was trying to protect you. The industry is brutal. I saw the toll it was taking on you. I just wanted you to have stability, a real life. A real life? I repeated, the words tasting like ash. You mean the life you and Mark decided was acceptable for me? The one where I manage your office and file your paperwork? That's the box you wanted to put me in, Chloe. For my own good, of course. I let out a short, humorless laugh. The funny thing is, you did protect me. You protected me from the soul-crushing despair of another dozen rejections. Your little act of mercy was the single greatest gift you could have ever given me. It gave me something more valuable than a publishing deal. It gave me rage. Pure, clean rocket fuel. Quote. Mark finally found his voice, shaking his head as if to clear it. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, his eyes darting between me and Chloe. The surgeon was back, assessing the damage, looking for a way to triage the situation. He switched tactics. The mockery was gone, replaced by a slick, sudden camaraderie. $1.5 million. My God, Leo, that's incredible. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone. You're going to need help managing that. Tax implications, investment strategies. I have a guy, the best in the city. We can set up a meeting. I held up a hand, stopping him cold. No, thank you, Mark. I think my first investment will be in finding advisors who haven't spent the last 20 years calling my life's work a silly little hobby. His face fell. The attempt to join my winning team had been denied. He was still on the outside, a position he had never experienced in his life. He looked utterly lost. My gaze returned to Chloe. She was now staring at the red wine stain on the tablecloth, her knuckles white where she gripped her fork. She looked small, stripped of the armor of her career and her pity. You know, Chloe, I said, my voice softening into something far more dangerous than a shout. Every night, when I sat down to write, I pictured your faces. I pictured this very table. Every time my hero was betrayed by those he trusted most, I wrote your dialogue. Every time he was underestimated and dismissed by the powerful council, I was transcribing a memory of a family dinner. I picked up my phone from the table, the screen still glowing with the contract that had detonated our lives. This document isn't just a Hollywood deal, it's an invoice. It's the bill for every condescending remark, every pitying glance, every single time you both made me feel like the family's charity case. I slid the phone back into my pocket. And now, you've paid it. In full. Chloe looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. Not tears of remorse, I knew, but tears of humiliation. What are we going to tell Dad? She whispered. It was the question I'd been waiting for. The final pillar of their world. Their father's approval. I don't know, Chloe. What are you going to tell him? I asked, standing up from the table. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound loud and decisive in the cavernous silence. You could tell him the truth. Tell him his failure of a son just closed a 7-figure deal to turn his fantasy into a blockbuster franchise. Then you can explain the part where you tried to kill that fantasy out of mercy. I'm sure he'll appreciate your foresight. I walked to the doorway of the dining room, then paused and looked back at them. They were 2 statues of success, now shattered. Mark, the brilliant surgeon, speechless and stained. Chloe, the powerhouse attorney, utterly broken by a contract she couldn't litigate her way out of. Enjoy your dinner, I said, the words echoing in the mahogany-paneled room. I have a flight to catch. Apex is flying me out to LA tomorrow. First class. I didn't run. I walked. Each step down the long, carpeted hallway was deliberate, a funeral march for the man my family thought I was. The silence from the dining room was my victory anthem, a profound, echoing void where their judgment used to be. My hand was on the polished brass handle of the front door when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I knew who it was before I even looked. The screen glowed. Father. Chloe, the dutiful daughter, had undoubtedly made the call, her voice choked with a humiliation she couldn't spin. I let it vibrate twice more, a small, petty indulgence, before answering. I stepped out onto the porch, the frigid Ohio air a welcome shock to my system. Leo! His voice was stretched taut, a wire of disbelief and irritation. I just got off the phone with your sister. She was incoherent. What is this nonsense about Hollywood? Nonsense. The perfect word. The final echo of their shared reality. It's not nonsense, Dad, I said, my own voice startlingly calm. The cold felt clarifying. It's a legally binding contract. I'm flying to LA in the morning to sign it. A long, crackling silence stretched between Cleveland and wherever he was. I could picture him perfectly, sinking into his leather wingback chair, the world tilting on its axis. He was a man who understood numbers and status, and I had just given him a dose of both that his mind couldn't process. "Well," he said finally, the tone shifting awkwardly from disbelief to a grudging, possessive pride. "I always knew you had it in you, son. You just needed to apply yourself." It was the most predictable, most insulting thing he could have said. An attempt to claim a piece of the victory, to rewrite history so he was the wise father all along. But the old wound didn't even ache. "No, Dad," I said, watching as the sleek black headlights of a town car swept down the street, stopping directly in front of the house. "My ride. You told me to give it up. You called it a fantasy. You offered me a job as an office manager." "A father worries," he started, falling back on the family mantra. "You were embarrassed," I cut him off, the words clean and without malice. They were simply the truth. "But you don't have to be anymore." I ended the call before he could respond. I didn't need to hear his justifications or his hollow, last-minute praise. The true victory wasn't the money or his approval. It was the silence on the other end of that line. What would you do if the same family members who called you a failure suddenly wanted to be a part of your life once you became successful?